music for you. I am explain. Well, I think it'll be pretty obvious who it is pretty quickly with this crowd. And I'll just say from the outset, this is going directly against the composer and artist's recommendation on how they should be experienced. But I thought, no, this actually ties in. So just give a listen to this first piece.
Reach 90%. Ready to pair another device.
Try this again.
Oh my God.
All right. So
Can people hear me? I can't get sound. Them.
You see the headphone? Why are they plugged in?
Oh, I know.
Well, are they charged or not charged?
Can people hear me? I'm not getting anything. I don't.
We were listening to some music today.
Oh, I couldn't get, it was, the audio was very, it was all jumbled up. I couldn't tell anything.
That's because I was playing a musical excerpt. So, I'm sure everyone here around this table recognizes that distinctive voice as Paul Simon. That is the opening sequence from his newest recording, 7 Psalms. Which, and just the story of how it came to be itself is pretty extraordinary. As I think is pretty obvious if you've ever set foot in my office or had any conversation with me. Paul Simon is my singer-songwriter of choice. And in 2016, he released an album called Stranger to Stranger. After which he said, I think I'm done. I think I'm done musically. I don't know what else I'll do. And he did one last farewell tour, which I unfortunately was not able to catch. But he did, one that was very clearly I'm getting too old for this. I am not interested in doing these big, huge tours with he's done an occasional charity appearance here and there for things that he's passionate about, particularly the environmental concerns. But he said, I think I'm done. 2018, he released a rather curious, as someone said, the most Paul Simon-y thing ever. He revisited some of his earlier compositions that he felt were really interesting and for whatever reason never really got traction, and re-recorded them with different musicians. Some of them with extraordinary effectiveness in terms of like, wow, that, I remember how that sounded on this album from 35 years ago, but this really hits. But otherwise, he has not put out anything new since 2016. And then a couple months ago, a video showed up on YouTube, talking about this and the making of this. And he said, in 2019, I woke up from a dream, and in that dream it said, "You're going to write and record an album called 7 Songs." And he woke up, he wrote that down on the notepad on his bedside table, and he said, "I had no idea what this meant. I had no idea what this was supposed to be. I was not planning on writing a new album." His relationship to his Judaism, which he says, his words, "the faith tradition I was born into, but I had little interest in." And so he said he would wake up in the night and there would be these phrases and these words, like, which again he would write down, and he started playing around with them and so on. Ultimately, taking the form of this, it is 33 minutes in length. And as I mentioned before we were listening, he recommends, his recommendation is, this is something that should be listened to straight through. So the fact that I played an excerpt, I'm sorry, Paul, but much as I'd love to listen to all 33 minutes of this with you, and we have other things to do. Sure. But he, so what we listened to, the opening psalm, kind of becomes a through line through which he revisits at various points throughout this. This was released about a week and a half ago. Yes, I stayed up till 11 o'clock at night. Because it was released on Friday at midnight East Coast time, which meant I could hear it
Earlier.
at 11 o'clock here. So listen to it then. I had already ordered the CD, so it was on its way. It was on its way. Paul loves playing around with all kinds of bizarre sounds and instruments. So I've he's one of the few artists that, yes, I will still buy CDs of. And let me rephrase that. He's one of the few major artists that I will actually buy CDs of. If it's a struggling independent, gigging musician, then it's, for example, then the CDs that you sell are still an important part of making sure that we have musicians, trying to make a go of it. So I buy CDs of those folks, but Paul is such an audiophile, and he is notoriously perfectionist in terms of what he wants out of a sound, and his endless creativity with the bizarre instruments that he brings in. So I played this because in realizing, and this was a last minute, I came upon this like about an hour-ish or so. It's like, okay, yes, this all fits in terms of Kushner's musings about how all of this is somehow connected, and this is all part of a larger experience of who we are as seemingly distinct individuals, seemingly separate individuals, but really we're all part of God, and we are it's Buddhist, but it also, I think there is a Jewish flavor to it, in the sense that we are waves that seem to be individual and distinct, but we're all part of the same larger ocean. And my friend and colleague, Rabbi Jeff Salkin, who is also quite the Paul Simon fan, and we've been chatting about this album online. And he says, this is Paul dealing with issues of his own mortality. The man's 81.
Oh,
He is 81. And which, I mean, the fact that, and that also actually, it's incredibly inspiring to me because, you know, at age 81, here he is coming out with this incredibly creative work. And Sondheim said some years ago, he said about, you know, most great artists, their later work is of lesser quality, but hey, a writer's got to write. So talking about himself and as well as others like that. But here he is at 81, coming out with this amazing piece of music. I've referred to it as a 33-minute tone poem. And I've listened to it now a number of times, as Paul instructed, you know, set aside 33 minutes, turn off the phone. I bought it in CD so I could listen to it in as high an audio quality as I can get. And it's a fascinating meditation on mortality. It's opening line. I've been thinking about great migration. He's not talking about geese and birds.
No,
He's
no.
talking about migrating from one realm to the next. The Paul Simon musical nerd that I have, there are lots of little things that kind of jump out at me. The opening guitar riff is sort of the construction of that he didn't write, but that appeared on the Sound of Silence album called Angie. And yeah, so that's where that opening riff is certainly recalling. Melodically, there are elements of a song off the Rhythm of the Saints called "Can't Run," but
I kept hearing things that I thought, is this something else?
right. But as Jeff Salkin points out, the most amazing thing, again, for someone who has said he's really not interested in Judaism, the fact that he is riffing and making new sounds and selfishly for us, just in terms of who we are, and you know, new metaphors for God and new ways of understanding God. And is the Lord is my engineer, the Lord is the earth I ride on, the Lord is face in the atmosphere, the path I slip and I slide on. There's a riff on slip, slide, and away.
Yeah, right.
So, and he comes back to this theme. It returns throughout the tone poem. And Jeff Salkin mentions that, and this is why it ties in with what Kushner is, I think, trying to say with this book. A refrain that he gets, a stanza that he gets to a little later is, "The Lord is my engineer, the Lord is my record producer. The Lord is the music I hear deep in the valley elusive." And Jeff Salkin says that, and Kushner says it pretty clearly here in the later part of Invisible Lines of Connection. You know, this idea of the Lord is my record producer. A good producer of an album of music will be someone who can say to an artist, regardless of how famous that they may be, a good producer will rein in an artist in some ways and be able to make recommendations to the artist who may think, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this. And the good producer would say, you know what would it sound like if this song came earlier? What if it sound? And Kushner gets to that but the notion that, you know, as we all approach our own great migration, so to speak, that looking backwards over our life, it's the tracks that we choose to represent our lives, and the order that we put them in, is some kind of effort to try to make sense of it all and to look back and think, okay, how did this all fit together? When were there moments where it did fit together? Anyway, please.
When someone like Paul Simon, who obviously is so talented, so brilliant, says, I was raised Jewish, I'm not really Jewish. And then you listen to something like that and you say, my question is, how Jewish is he after all? Is he not pretty darn Jewish when all is said and done?
Yeah, I think a big piece of it, came from when and where he grew up and what the nature of,
New York?
yes, very.
Institutional.
But
maybe he doesn't think
the-
of himself that
Right,
way.
the state of institutional Judaism, where he was growing up in Forest Hills, Queens in the mid 1950s. I mean, his experience was not unique. And there were plenty of young Jews who were just like, I have no interest in this. This is.
Which is the
this is
shame.
corporate," but-
So.
Right, but clearly there's something stirring within his soul here. I mean, I kind of think, if there had been different kinds of expression of Judaism at the time, whether or not he would have found something more to his liking or more to his taste. I'll cut to the spoilers, as it were. It was a fascinating gathering some years ago that the Dalai Lama brought together of Jews from a variety of different flavors, came together and as a result of a question that the Dalai Lama and others had, which was, our teenagers are not hanging around. This is a problem, because if we can't get kids to stick around, then this what do we do? And then they realized, it's like, well, wait, there's this group of people that hasn't had a homeland for nearly 2,000 years, and they held it together. Now they have a homeland again, but they managed to, so maybe we can learn something from them. And so there was this extraordinary, meeting between the Dalai Lama and representatives of various flavors of Judaism that occurred, and this is all detailed in a book called The Jew and the Lotus, Roger Kamenetz. And spoilers for the end, and tying into Paul's dissatisfaction with the Judaism of his youth. It was mentioned towards the end of their meeting together. One of them addressed the elephant in the room, as it were, and thanked the Dalai Lama for this incredible opportunity to learn together and so on, and said, but I have to bring this up. A third of American Buddhists are apostate Jews. Yeah. And he said, we're a small people. We're a small people, and we were devastated by the Shoah. And we can't take those kind of hits to our numbers if we're going to survive. And the Dalai Lama's comment was, I've learned so much from you in the past week or however long they met for. And I've learned that Judaism has an incredibly rich and deep spiritual and mystical tradition, which, and he said, if you teach that to your children, they won't want to leave. If you fail to teach that to your children, they should leave.
Oh, wow. Throws it right back.
Yep. Yeah. So,
That's interesting. We're trying.
yeah, right.
We're
We're trying. I mean, this group here around the table, and Sydney's having technical difficulties, obviously, but
Yeah.
but we're trying. And that's what we do. We keep on trying, and frustrations and setbacks aside, that's
They
That's what
want
we do.
it. I mean, knowing, sitting in the room with those kids, that's what they want. Yeah, they want to know about other religions, but one reason they do is, what do they have that we don't? And it may be not because they want to embrace it, but just, what else is out there? I mean, when you go shopping, it's not because you want to buy everything that's there. But they're curious, they're just curious, right, they're just curious, but part of it is because they also want to appreciate what they have. And you should hear what some of those philosophical discussions are like. If you remember when you were in school and you sat on the dorm floor and whatever else you did when you were sitting having those philosophical discussions, we won't discuss, but some of them are there already doing that, why this and why not that, and what if, and frankly, Milo Pats, wow. Pacing back and forth on my party room floor but this and the questions they have, 14 years old and 15 years old, and it's amazing. So they just want to talk.
You have 4 children.
And they just
Yeah.
want it, there's 5, yeah,
Probably your way.
hopefully once in a while 5. And Molly doesn't say much, but boy, the wheels just turning. Yeah, it's just.
It's great that you took that on, yeah. Thank
Oh,
you.
but I get so much out of it, and it's just. Breathtaking.
well. Perhaps if a 15-year-old Paul Simon had a class like that and he was a teacher, and
Might have been good.
I don't have to do much. You turn on the cocoa and.
But don't you think, like Paul Simon, given his age, don't you always feel like as you get older, or people in general, as they get older, you all of a sudden, you do start to think about your mortality, and maybe there's something, and that's why people go back to their religion or find a new religion or whatever. That's, for him to name it, 7 Psalms, I mean, that's religious. So what is he trying to say? Okay, I think maybe now is a good time to embrace what I neglected all this year. I don't know. I'm just.
As you get older, you just say it.
I'll say, but I'll also say I don't think Paul Simon is unreligious. I just think he's found expressions in other ways. Again, back to Jeff Sullivan, who once opined about it. It's like, Paul, would it have killed you to have done a collaboration with the Klezmatics? Would it have killed you to have done like a klezmer themed album with a group like that? But as a teenage kid listening to his transistor radio and little earpiece and so on, the sounds he was listening to were early rock and roll, and early rock and roll. Early rock and roll is heavily influenced by gospel music, by African American music, and Elvis Presley was successful because he took a sound that already existed and was already being played, but he was a safe white boy, although not.
Well, I was a Shabbos boy too.
Yes.
It was easy on the
But
eyes.
so, gospel music has a very different set of spiritual parameters to it. And so what he was listening to and was most excited by was not the music of the synagogue circa 1950s America. That was not the music of that time. So anyway,
Sounded to me like he had an Irish.
Yeah, I go through. Yeah,
I was,
Well, I would really like to hear the whole thing. I may go home and buy it. And it's amazing how when you close your eyes, you hear better. I mean,
oh, of course.
I don't know what that phenomenon actually is, because, you know,
Yeah,
the words,
totally.
the words on the, whatever, but there was a phrase I heard that I have to go back and listen to again. No one dies of too much love. Oh, my goodness. It makes you want to pick up the phone and
Yeah,
call
yeah.
people. I mean, is that from an old something, or is that just totally new from
From
his
his
album?
heart.
he's putting stuff together from wherever it comes, and
Well, and the fact that the song is a song, they're not all.
right,
Some of them are admonitory, is that a word, you know, warning, waggling the finger.
admonishing.
Admonishing, but some of them are, well, also songs of praise.
Right,
They're all over the place, but
right.
they're still.
A teacher of mine, once said that the book of Psalms is a book of emotional extremes. Okay, it's either absolute depths of despair and sadness, or ecstatic exuberance, praise of God, hallelujah, which literally means praise God, hallelujah, yeah, being a name of God. And not a whole lot in the middle. There's not a whole lot of psalms that say, I'm doing okay. Yeah, things are all right. It's like they tend to be, extreme. So so it occurred to me after having listened to this multiple times over the past week and a half, and then, getting my final prep in for what to say about the rest of Invisible Lines. It's like, okay, they're on the same wavelength here. They've synced up. And as Lawrence Kushner would say, it's like, this isn't coincidence. This is
God.
this is right. This is God. This is the fact that I realized this morning that some of the themes on this album are echoed very strongly in Kushner's essays in this book. And it's like, okay, and this book was written over 25 years ago. And so, but here, Paul suddenly shines a good light on it, as it were. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because he sounds kind of like he was older when he wrote it, especially in this last.
Kushner, I'm trying to remember the last time he's actually written anything. It's been a while since he released his last book, which I think it is and he uses this in one of the essays. His most recent book, I think it was called "I'm God, You're Not."
Right to the point.
Yeah. But he has been, I mean, but he has been, like Paul saying, I think I'm done musically. He's been painting landscapes of San Francisco, where he now lives, and he will regularly post kind of these sort of impressionistic kind of paintings that he makes of, a street in San Francisco with
It's amazing.
a cable car coming
What
out.
else that they all do.
So that's where I am this morning, and I highly recommend this. I think it's a very powerful, spiritual piece of work, as well as amazing musically.
And we're support.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So.
Again, the fact that at age 81, it's like, okay, he's still got that spark. And that spark is still there.
That's really nice to know.
When is your album coming out, Bernie?
Yeah, not into that. I go in a different direction.
Is anybody 81?
Or is anybody here
Alice is,
older than I am?
Who?
Alice is.
Alice just turned 81.
Is that possible?
I'm going on 83.
I can't believe that,
Oh.
Do
but
you
it's
know
in
that
your head, you know?
Huh?
My mother. was gonna be
quarks
80
are
when she was
described
81.
by flavors? You like to use flavors. I don't remember the flavors. Truth
Who
is,
said that again?
quarks, the elementary particles that make up protons and neutrons.
What about him?
We're going,
You have to describe them in science, right? Ernie? All the characteristics and,
I just read
Of
an
quarks?
article,
yes,
I thought that was
Quarks.
a cereal.
what? Oh,
I just
cereal.
read an article way back on what some people think about cosmology and stuff, and I am thoroughly confused.
Oh, I read a paperback book called The Red Ship once, a long time ago.
It's not that level, they're talking about something way below it. Whether space really is space or whether it's a holographic kind of thing,
Yeah.
Oh, amen.
all kinds of stuff. It's way beyond anything I
I gotta go to the.
ever
grocery
delved
store.
close to. I finally realized I never really was a theoretical physicist. I was an experimental physicist. But there's a level of theory that just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper.
Into the quantum
Now, I am,
realm.
I'll tell you, I'm not convinced where they're going is going to be the right endpoint. They may end up finding out that it's just all some house of cards being built on trying to figure things out, and someday, well, as Einstein did, okay, there was all kinds of problems, and all of a sudden he saw a completely different question, asked the question a completely different way, gave a completely different answer, and tore everything apart.
And see, I thought you were gonna say it's like peeling an onion, and when you peel it all apart, there's nothing left.
But tears.
Well, maybe.
Yeah,
The other thing they're pointing out is Einstein was thoroughly confused at the end by the inconsistencies he finally got to.
Yeah.
And could never resolve them.
well, it's like getting to the end of a research project and finding, you know, there's no, just no, what is it? No different, no,
Distinction.
No distinction.
no discernible difference, or what's no statistical difference, and that's a finding. It's like,
Sort of like getting old.
what, you know, that's a result. Okay,
Or-
all right,
Or the progression within empirical philosophy of you got Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, and Locke saying that we're all just tabula rasa, that we are just blank slates to be written upon, and Barclay says, well, there's no such thing as matter. There's no such thing as matter. It's all mind. And then David Hume, troublemaking Scotsman, comes along and says, no, there's no such thing as mind. And then philosophically proves that. Okay, great job, gentlemen. Now
what?
Now where do we go? And it's like, well, then,
Take us there.
all right, let's go to the Germans. Let's do an annual.
now let's go to the
concept.
car.
As Mark Twain famously said, I would rather decline 2 glasses of German beer than decline 1 German verb. Anyway,
Yay.
I hope that you've appreciated this book. I mean, it's it's reminded me how much I love this book, and so when we
I do have one possible connection that I probably have conveyed to many of you before that I think is kind of a mind blow. And that was the story of my godson. Have you heard the story of my godson? I've told you the story of my godson.
go ahead, tell it again.
When I started teaching, I wound up just by accident rooming with a nice young woman from Racine, and we roomed together, shared an apartment for a year or so, and we stayed friends ever since. I met her in 1974, Anita, and she and I are still friends. It's many years later, 49 years later, right? Okay. So in the meantime, Anita married and she had a couple of kids and her second child was a boy named Michael. And when it was time for Michael to be baptized, because Anita and her husband Ken are Catholic, she asked me to be his godson. And I said, okay, thank you for the honor. I'm not sure about that.
What do they call me?
Oh, she said, all you have to do is just hold him, and his godson will be my brother Dave, and all, just hold him. The priest will sprinkle him. The priest knows you're Jewish. He stood up in our wedding. He was the one who went. I said, well, let me think about it. So I went to Dina Feingold. I said, should I do this? She said, no, I don't think so, but I know you're going to do what you're going to do. So, all right. So I said, well, if all I have to do is make sure he gets, his Catholic
You don't drop him.
education, and your brother's going to take care of that, then sure, I'll just hold him. So I held Michael at his baptism, and none of the water got on. I guess it was okay. So fine. So Michael grew up to be a wonderful young man. He was an Eagle Scout and he graduated from high school with great grades, and he went to UWM and majored in social work and started hanging out at Hillel. He started studying with Rabbi Shapiro. Wow. And then when he got an internship in Racine, and he couldn't make it up to Shalom, he started studying with Rabbi Feingold. And he eventually converted. I'm a Jewish godson.
No. That's a story. That is a good story. And what is your friend?
That's.
They're very happy for him, and I was, of course, invited to his conversion. And I gave him a bowl for honey so he could, celebrate. He's a wonderful person. He's a real good neshama, and he's probably not the only Catholic. Well, don't we know? I keep saying we should sit at the table. No, you'd be surprised how many. Yeah. What? Yeah. So anyway, I didn't do a thing. All I did was hold. That's all.
But there again, the Lord is my record. It's like, okay, so here's an earlier track of, you holding this baby, and then
Yeah.
decades later.
It's like the one with him residing at the funeral of the mother who died, and then the baby later.
Yeah. I've read this book many times, and I've read that essay many times. It guts me every time I read it. So
Yeah.
just,
17 years later.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. I don't know if any of you read the paper today about
Yeah,
this
we did.
Orthodox
just
family,
heartbreaking.
front page. But anyhow, and talking about, converting, you look at this
Uh-huh.
family and you think, oh, traditional Orthodox family. No,
No,
Yoni embarked
He
on a long
converted.
journey that ended with a conversion to Orthodox Judaism.
Yeah.
He had already converted, blah, 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 and he grew up Episcopalian in Shorewood.
Yeah.
And then the more I learned about Jewish culture, the more I realized my own self was staring back at me. So, you look at this and you think,
Sister
like an
Alana.
Orthodox Jew.
Yeah.
So you don't get
Although I am a little, is anybody else a little taken back by this young woman almost bearing her breasts?
I know, I saw that, I thought, well, there's a rest in the family in the front row.
We all want that.
what is she doing?
She's got a low cut
I
dress.
saw that, I read the article.
No, She's got a low cut dress on, so
Yeah.
she definitely is an outlier in the family, literally.
I just looked at it, I was like,
Of course, I think we have to take into consideration for age too.
Well,
I think it's
I know, but
that
the family
rebellious.
traditions or whatever, I don't know, I was just.
Well, I'm
Okay.
sure that
I
I
think rabbis probably
made a call.
definitely not us.
Well, they go to Beth Yehuda, so they're Chernobylers.
So did you want her to
And
wear a
what does that
wig
mean?
or a hat on her
They're-
head?
No, me the other, I'm just
I
saying.
know, it's just,
Short sleeves, really, the Orthodox.
Like
you mentioned the philosophy of tabula rasa.
I think that.
Yeah.
First of all,
Set.
a- You're part of it.
Yes.
But the other part about the philosophy, tabula rasa, which I just, what bothers me with the whole concept is we think evolution has to do with our physical bodies. And I've come to the conclusion it has to do with everything, including not only the shape of our brains, but the content of our programming. Which means there is no such thing as tabula rasa. You are born of your parents, and we do know, we say, oh, he's his father's son, she's his father's daughter, whatever, okay? And I think it's real.
Yeah.
There are enough moments that, again, with perspective, that you can kind of realize, even have glimpses of that. My sister and I, and we have not lived in a household. And our mother at one point said, yeah, your dad used to do that. And again, it's where did that come from? So,
I
but
mean, where the way you think about life sometimes, what you become, clearly you're not controlled by it completely,
No.
but there are things that you see that are completely unconscious. This may be a physical or a learned behavior. But the whole concept of gender to me means that there's something going on in evolution that's that we think doesn't exist. And I think exists.
Elaborate.
Well, as we grew up, we were told, you know, there are men and women, that's it, and everybody else is an exception to the rule. Okay, what we're learning is there are a hell of a lot of exceptions to the rule
That's
these
right. It
days.
never was that way in
More
the
and
first
more,
place.
there wasn't any exceptions to the rule. But my thinking has gone, supposing evolution says that the basic rule is that men like women and they like seeing women, they respond to women, and women respond the same way. But there are things called variations, there are things called, you know,
Different at many levels,
okay,
yeah.
things. And supposing gender is a combination of those programs, so to speak, but there are multiple ones, and you can have breakdowns in one of them in part of your evolution because, you know, it's what do you call it? Just a chain, you know, a breakdown. And supposing there's a whole class of things which define gender, and some of them break down, and therefore maybe there are men who don't respond to women, but they respond to men instead.
Maybe.
Well, what we have,
You know
what we
what I'm
have,
saying?
yeah, what we have been saying.
I'm
in
saying
terms of
it's-
social.
Come to the conclusion that it may just be an evolutionary thing having to do with variations, et cetera, because what we've learned is there's a lot more of
Oh,
gender
absolutely.
mixing than we ever thought was going on when we were
Or
growing up.
certainly knew it,
the
did
so-
not know it as.
Well-
And it's not, and it is not, and
Yeah,
it's not,
Right,
it's not an American thing, and it is not a religious thing.
Well, things happen, you know,
It
thousands
goes
of years
across
ago.
everything, it goes across all of these relationships.
go to the pyramids, there's a basic problem with what you're saying.
Pardon?
There's a basic problem with what you're saying. Because really reproduction is the ultimate goal of life. And if, can I finish?
Yeah.
And if two people love each other that can't reproduce, I mean, that's fine, that happens between men and women as well. People that pass on their genes.
Taught me that philosophy.
Yeah, but that.
He was what?
He was pre-med and he taught me that philosophy that it's like in nature.
Cool,
If it's
isn't
a
it?
gay gorilla, he's not gonna reproduce with a female gorilla.
Elaine, that's one part of human behavior. But What? Is it to say the only reason humans exist is for that? I think it's like that. Well, I mean, the primary reason for gender is for that. For this. Okay, that's fine, but the relationships between human beings is what we come to believe, I think, at least in our realm of existence, is what is more important than only propagation of the species.
I wasn't saying that,
Primarily
but-
propagation of the species, although that is important because
but
our
that's the-
birth rates are falling and we need to have more.
What I
But
said
Bernie
at
was
the
talking
beginning-
about evolutionary, evolution.
Okay,
But what I said at the beginning was, I suspect that the primary relationship is gender and sex related to each other because of reproduction. But then you end up with a whole pile of outliers beyond that,
Yeah.
some of which
For a
you
variety
grow
of
look,
reasons.
more and more today, in fact. Everything that is become medical problems, et cetera, is becoming worse and worse. Because in fact, those people don't die anymore.
Why didn't I-
These things now are getting. I'm thinking
Compromised.
this stuff, okay?
okay, yeah.
Do you think people 500 years ago needed glasses?
Yes.
They may have died. They may have died.
Well, to the extent, well, no, I needed them when I was 9 years old.
What I'm saying, they may have died 500 years ago. But they don't anymore.
For lack of.
And so the genes that create eye problems do not interfere anymore with reproduction.
Okay, that, you mean very severe eye problems that would
Whatever you
cause,
want to talk about, okay?
so bad vision that would cause you to die.
So I
Yeah,
think that's why you have more and more people needing,
Okay, yeah,
eyeglasses
I
these
get what
days.
you mean. I get what you
and I suspect the same is going the same way with gender relationships, et cetera.
mean. Could be, because they're,
Because they
there are
are.
other ways to read IVF or whatever. Yeah.
What I'm saying, I suppose, is my presumption is that way back 1,000 years ago, the strongest relationship was, as you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay,
by necessity.
but eventually. But there's always outliers, and eventually, as those outliers start being able to live longer,
Mhm.
they mix in. I mean, one thing came to mind was, what's his name sings those flowers, red and white flowers, okay? You have red flowers and you have white flowers and you have pink
Mental,
flowers,
mental.
okay? And then the pink can produce red or white.
Well,
Okay,
actually,
but they can produce pink as well.
We
The
don't
point
get
is,
into
the point is the
science
mixing,
squares.
the point is the mixing is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I think the more and more we keep people from dying because of these variations, the more and more they spread.
Interesting. You know,
And I don't think it's a problem. I don't say that it's a problem necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's what I think is happening.
I think that can be rewritten for so many things. I think about my mother's family, that there was a strain in that family of kidney failure. I had a brother who had kidney replaced, or donor kidney. But my uncle Frank, or who 2 generations ago, it wasn't my uncle, he was my mother's uncle, 2 of his boys hung himself in the barn. And when they found them, each individually, years apart, they found out they both had kidney failure.
They didn't want to go through.
And they didn't want to go, well, there wasn't.
There was
There was
nothing to do
nothing,
but
there was
die of
nothing.
it. Right.
Yeah, another guy graduated from Marquette University with legs this big because there was no place for him to go.
Yeah.
So it's like what you talk about these, that was another whole aspect, and I'm sure that the volumes have been written or will be
All
written.
I'm saying,
I think-
I have a feeling that evolution is not just about our physical things, but in fact, our mental programming,
Yeah, that's bottom line. of what
Absolutely.
I'm saying.
Absolutely.
That's true.
which is not something we don't tend to think that way.
I know there are things. that
Tabula
come-
rasa is exactly the point.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, I'm not saying the empiricists and that whole school came about at a specific point in time and Western European history and so on, and the, coinciding with scientific revolution and with a new way of understanding how they, at the time, they thought people worked and how.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not saying I espouse that notion of.
No, I didn't say you were, I'm
Tabula
saying, but that concept says
Yeah,
that our programming is blank when we're born.
no, I
I think that's what tabula rasa means, right?
empirical evidence.
Yeah.
refute it on that.
Anyway, this thing clearly says that's not true.
Yeah.
To an extent that's,
Right.
to an extreme extent, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
The, if I can change one other thing I thought when I read in there, which was this question is, why do you think God cares what you think?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Okay, and
I'm not gonna do this.
that's a
Yep.
really interesting question.
Right. That and the line that I forget if it's Kushner or it's Jeff Sullivan. It could be either the Cantor. I don't think I believe in God. It's like, but tell me more about this God you don't believe in. Chances are I don't believe in that God.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
But-
it's like having a
See, I
conversation.
used to
But
think
I-
the kids.
I'm asking what-
Bears.
I was asking, what does he think the important
Bears,
point about that
bears.
is? And I think it's the belief that God has already defined what your plans are.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you
Deus
think.
ex machina.
I think that, is that a legitimate interpretation of that line?
That does or doesn't?
I think it's a bit more subtle than that.
I do too, but I'm not sure what it is.
It's not that there's no free will. It's a matter of, I think he says at various points through this book and I think also in Honey from the Rock, that the notion that, we can either choose, we can either choose to do what we were intended to do, or we can resist against that, but one way or the other, but.
Yeah.
So-
Once.
You will be down.
Did that answer
Well,
your?
yeah, it was just, I thought it was an interesting point because. I mean, I agree, it's more subtle than what I said, and I knew that, but the very obvious part is like. Ultimately, it doesn't matter in a sense. I mean, the pathway, the ultimate path has been sort of decided, the details are probably not decided.
See, but not talking about necessarily the genetics and everything, but I always sort of thought that people ask, what's being Jewish, why not being Jewish? And sometimes you say, well, for one, we don't follow the ways of Christ and things like that, and they're like, really, you don't believe in Christ and whatever it is, because, people who believe in Christ, they're gonna spend their whole time waiting for the goodness and the best place to turn out. And my thing is, I view, if you have a relationship with God as you're moving through your life, you try to support the things that God would want people who are like he is or she is, to be sharing the goodness with, so that you have it during when people are alive versus waiting until they die to get the best, the good part. You know what I'm saying?
I completely agree with you.
Oh, good, see? No, but I mean, really, like, yes, but, and we've talked about it.
Yeah.
You know, so my thing is help and participate in things that, however you look at God is, because now is our time to make that difference, whatever.
Right,
it is.
don't
And-
show up at the funeral.
Right, and that's, yeah, Judaism is focused, is focused on this life.
Mhm.
Now, again, traditional Judaism did have a dodge in that, and that, okay, the righteous will be restored to life when Mashiach arrives. And
Right.
so the ones buried on the Mount of Olives, they're first in line, according to that theology.
Right.
But the clear emphasis in Judaism as opposed to Christianity and Christianity's answer to that eternal question, or Eastern traditions, which say that this world is corrupt, this world is this is not what's important. It's we want to try to escape this world. We want to try to achieve some state of nirvana or like that. Judaism says, no, this is the world we got.
Right.
And as Rabbi Charles Sherman always used to say to the visiting church groups, many of whom would inevitably ask, how come there's no altar? Don't you do the sacrifices like in the book of Leviticus? But as Charles Sherman would, inevitably a question about Jewish ideas of the afterlife and so on would come up, and he'd say, this is going to sound like I'm making a joke, but I'm not trying to joke here. It's like some Jews believe in heaven and hell, and some don't.
Right.
Again, the halakha, the laws, what you do and don't do, that is binding in traditional Judaism. That's your actions are what's important. What you choose to believe in the Talmud's got all kinds of bizarre, supernatural, crazy stories in it. In amidst the how do you determine whether this is kasher or not?
Use the women's.
But the whole notion is the fanciful stuff. We don't know. We don't know what happens
Yes,
after
you know
this
what,
world.
when-
So we leave that up to God,
Right.
and we do our part
Best.
here as best we possibly can.
When my dad was passing away down in Northwestern, 5 years ago,
Is
and
it that long?
yeah,
Really?
and Garrett was there. And Bela was there, but Garrett was there, and the rabbi, I didn't know the rabbi, but he came into Northwestern Hospital. And he said, well, do you have any questions? And I said, Garrett, this rabbi is here for everybody, not just a grown-up, do you have any questions? And he said, yes. He said to the rabbi, what does the Torah talk about? But afterlife, or where do people go and things like that? And he gave the exact same,
Question.
yeah, for a young
Yeah.
man being, wondering what to do with myself and things like that. And he gave this, I agreed with that answer. I would have said the same thing if I was by myself with him, but he was there, and that's the answer he gave, which I thought was very comprehensive.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Isn't it? And he asked them.
It is. I mean, but I had to approach my family and tell them, not my immediate family, but big family. I just chose one person that I knew would just. And now I get happy Hanukkah cards.
For that.
No, not all of them, believe me, but I thought, well, that's such a statement.
That is something.
That is a very nice recognition.
Yeah, very accepting.
Yeah,
That's exactly what they were doing, and say, Sandy.
but that's the thing that when I give these talks, I think that gets a lot of the shock and awe is, well, we don't really believe. so
And they're
much
like,
in-
what?
Yeah, and we aren't working for the reward afterwards, and it's like. Cause, they do, that's the thing that. No, we're here to do the best
Mhm.
can to make this world better and be the best people we can and help
Regardless.
each other and focus on this, and the world to come will take care of
Its own
itself,
yeah.
and, you know, God will take care of it, God will do that.
That's God's department.
It's very hard for them to
It's-
understand.
It's above our pay grade.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and,
Our security.
so, how do you get salvation?
Right.
Like I said. You
You
know,
have to
just
go in the confession.
do the work here, do the work,
The work.
you know, and,
Didn't we already go through that?
huh? Yeah, I just said that. I just,
Yeah.
did you hear what I said?
Well,
They don't know.
I
what
mean,
to-
I,
they-
it
they don't know what
can
to
be
do.
so outside of their whole.
That's it, they
worldview
don't,
that
they
it's-
just don't.
They don't
They're
get it
always
open.
talking about,
They know not.
we are
they
full
saw
of
it.
sin, we have to.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
you know, they're always with the sin and born with sin and sin.
That's the
sin,
worst
and-
of it.
Yeah.
And no, we're born pure souls because God made us. God don't make bad stuff, you know. Oh, well.
Let me
Yeah.
ask, maybe I have the wrong understanding. I don't think all Christians
Oh, no.
are that way. There are a set of them who
Oh,
just
you're right.
know that that's the
You
only
are
thing that exists.
absolutely right, and I don't want
But
to
there are a lot who
generalize.
do want to do the good work here.
Absolutely, Brian.
Maybe
Absolutely,
from
but I-
our perspective,
Yeah,
maybe from our perspective with a goal that we don't believe.
you're right,
Okay.
but I have gotten
But-
that kind of reaction all.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of people who say, I mean, I've looked at people doing things saying, how can you claim you're Christian when you do things like that?
And when the idea of the next world is what we're working for, then the corollary to that is, then why bother to really spend a whole lot of time on people now? I was just listening on the radio this morning to how do we help people who are without shelter? And the Cicero, did you hear this? The Cicero Foundation, or whatever the name of it is, their idea is to withdraw all funding for homeless shelters. And instead have basically concentration camps for people who are homeless. Because if you provide money to help with the short-term solution until you can do the long-term solution, all you're doing is enabling these people.
Yeah.
You know, so they want to withdraw all money for that kind of stuff, you know. So obviously they're thinking, these are bad people. I mean, you have to and so why waste money on these people because they, you know, what's.
They're bad.
And, but, you know, they'll get their reward
They're-
/ punishment later. Instead, we shouldn't waste the money. This was on NPR this morning.
But for the grace of God, there I go.
Except
Right.
they're, you find out who funds them, I'm sure you'll see Koch brothers. on
Oh, and
there or
remember
something.
the uproar, during the AIDS epidemic, and of course, that was a really tough time
Oh,
at the
horrible.
beginning, because nobody knew exactly what was going on, but the interesting thing was, that there were a lot of progressive medical people who said, we need to provide clean needles.
Oh, yeah,
That's the one basic thing, and there was
and
such
condoms,
uproar.
condoms, yeah.
And well, condoms and
Yeah.
safe sex and the whole thing, but, the idea that it was spread,
Until you
blood
find
to
out.
blood was, scary for
Yeah,
not the normal average person, because we didn't share section
Right.
very much. But, for people who are IV drug users and whatever, and I just remember that uproar about clean needles, and it was like,
yeah.
what's wrong with providing clean needles? It'll help.
Remember, there was another side to the coin, which is these people being punished by God
God, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
for what they were
definitely.
doing.
Absolutely,
Well, there's still. there's
They
persistent
deserved it.
few quarters.
even though you got it from
And
a blood
persists in some corners of Judaism.
Of course it does.
Just
yes.
what? 100.
That's a
The
punishment.
notion that this is some kind of divine punishment,
Mhm.
immoral behavior.
I have a couple of DVDs at home if ever, on milk, like this is, yeah,
Wow.
and a few others that like they came up with with solutions in Sweden, I think it was.
Mhm.
But the United States was too competitive,
Mhm.
and then, so they wouldn't accept the information that they had because they didn't
medical.
Great,
information.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is.
I remember my son coming home from New York. And
Yeah.
suffering with that,
Mhm.
and couldn't find any way to cut his hair. They wouldn't
Wow.
touch it. And a young woman stepped up in the neighborhood, and she was, that's how she made her living. And just knocked on the door and said, I'll do it,
Wow.
it's. But I remember him saying to me when he was in the hospital in New York too, Mom, please go and spend some time with this young woman. She was the only one on the ward, on 2 wards, that had AIDS. And she was always alone in her room. And she had a quilted bedspread that was just beautiful, flowered and everything. He said, I can't go to her. Please go to her.
So she was sick too, huh?
Yeah, she got it from her husband. Yeah, so there's a lot of, I could write a book on
Yeah.
the stories of.
Yeah.
We had the
But you know-
AIDS built at our school. It was very.
Yeah.
Did they pass it around to each other? And they could put on the square?
It was hung on.
First of all, I don't remember much about that time, but it was beautiful and it was moving.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can.
He had a roommate, Mark had a roommate who was much older than he was, who had AIDS. There were 2 beds in a room. And the mother stood out in the hallway and she would not come in and feed him. And he was incapable of feeding himself. And Mark said, Mom, feed him, please feed him. So I did.
People didn't know for a
And
long
then there
time
was a lot of
what all the
misinformation.
transmission mechanisms were.
It's like,
They were really scared. I mean, look at COVID, okay?
Well, obviously,
Where
she was scared, I tried to talk to her and she wouldn't talk. So that was okay, that was her decision.
Yeah,
Oh, the
I'm
one
just
with
saying,
the pen
people
marks, yeah.
really were scared
No, the one.
at what the mechanisms of
Oh.
transmission were. They knew a few.
I had a student who had hemophilia. And I taught kids with orthopedic impairments, and this boy had the joint problems that come with hemophilia. And always had a runny nose. It's always sickly. And I thought, oh, well, he's got hemophilia, can whatever. And I was talking to my brother about this one time, because that's a blood disorder, and that's part of what an oncologist deals with. And I told Mark about that, and he said, he's a hemophiliac. Might have AIDS. I said, oh.
blood transfusions in the
Because he
beginning.
got blood
were not
products.
screened.
He got blood products, not frequently, but he did get them. And I said, oh, and he'd been in my classroom already 2 years. So by then it was like, well, a little late now, the horse is out of the barn. So, and then that was like the end of the 2nd school year, and the next year he went somewhere else. And I happened to mention it to one of the PTs or a couple of PTs or whatever. And I don't know what happened after he left, but people were like, oh, and the other, we didn't do anything except the normal sanitation procedures we did in the school. We had a lot of kids who didn't have good oral motor control when they drew, so we often, wiped down everything and stuff. But yeah, it's like, yeah, he might have had AIDS, and he did.
And isn't it interesting, talking about this, we don't hear much about AIDS right now, do we?
Except the ads on TV for.
Right, for
keeping
drugs, but I
people,
mean,
what is it?
overall, that's
Undetectable.
under the
Stupid
radar
ad.
these days. Like, I
All the
feel
drugs
like-
that keep you undetectable. Yeah. I don't know that there are huge numbers of people dying, but I know that my nephew is gay, and incidentally, he had more trouble being Jewish at Vassar than he did being gay. But no, it's a concern of his, being a young gay man. He's going to the University of Chicago next year for grad school. So I can see him, but it's a concern of his.
Sure,
And
okay.
he's, takes.
I said, I haven't, it came up and I'm like, gosh, haven't heard or read or,
Well, and it's
They
also
pretty
just
well.
kind of become embedded within our culture and society in terms of things you do and don't do. To the point where, you know, CPR instruction now is taught, you get a shield so that if you have to do mouth to mouth to stay alive, you have something as a barrier to prevent.
Well, in my head would be,
Fluids.
oh, there could be COVID. Just as easily, you know, a person can have no symptoms and have COVID. Just as protective.
So everybody stay healthy, you know, it's like, oh, okay.
All right.
Eat your citrus.
Yeah.
Eat your citrus.
So, but there was a book we read with book club, but I think it was before this book club you had. And it took place in Europe somewhere, and what happened was one of the villages got some form of contagious disease. And so people were told not to flee, because then they would go to the next village and pass it on. And thus many did leave, and it did pass it on, but what they did also is they had to supply food to them. So they had an area out, like, I don't know if it was a mile out, but way far out. And then they would leave the food, and then these people would come and get the food so that they had plenty of distance. But the
Well, like leprosy in the.
That's because it's sick.
Which now is treated with, I believe, antibiotics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
My father was a dermatologist.
Oh,
I
he
remember
was?
I remember he went and did some work. We were living in Albuquerque at the time. I was a young boy, and I remember he went and did some work with some of the indigenous folks, and one of the concerns at the time was there were folks suffering from leprosy, and he said, I'll be washing my hands a lot. So
is it,
But-
it's contagious?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
And so, I mean, and then, so, like, then they go into someplace else too, or?
I'll bring this back full circle. I think it's a good place to close. I've heard a couple of divrei Torah from physicians, dermatologists on the ever beloved Torah portion of Caesarea Mitzorah. And the couple of takeaways from the perspective of contemporary dermatologists in reading Leviticus, I think it's 14, Mitzorah, that whatever this was, it does not behave like the disease of leprosy as it's medically known today. I'm forgetting the name for Hansen's. Thank you. Back there somewhere buried. And, but yeah, so it does not act in the same way as Hansen's disease does now. So whatever this was, it wasn't that. So it's a bit of a mistranslation. But the other piece that I think is really important with that Torah portion is that when you had some kind of skin ailment, you needed to go to the Kohen, you needed to go to the priest, and it had a series of parameters and things that needed to be done, and times where you had to be in isolation and so on. But the entire, as one person pointed out, the entire point of all of this was taking something that was, to a pre-germ theory society, something that was understandably frightening and understandably contagious, and make a framework so that a person could be reunited with the community in as quick a way possible. And to say, look, there are rules for this. God gave us Torah. Moses brought it down from Sinai. There are rules that say, no, this is what you do. And it's like, and once certain conditions have been met of those rules, that person can shave their hair and then re-enter society, which the whole goal of that, when you look at it that way, is let's not isolate people, let's not have people be outcasts. Let's make sure we make it as possible as we can to bring people in, and to not cast people out. And as we conclude this program year's cycle of,
Where did this go?
as we conclude this program cycle of Midrash class, I'll conclude with something that Chris Androwski posted online, which I adored, and said anytime you draw a line and try and exclude people, Jesus immediately walks to the other side of that line and invites you to join him.
So,
And Cantor, I thought of you, what chapter was this? Oh, it was the one on bats. I counsel my students on the eve of their graduation from rabbinical school,
Yes.
all terrified they won't get the job they want. Relax. Because God is going to put you where God wants you, whether you like it or not. And I thought, here's Cantor Levson. Here was Wisconsin. So happy that you're here.
Well, you're certainly where we need.
Very much.
and we hope wherever you need us to be.
I'm honored to be here with you all.
Thank you.
Nate and Ellie Crane has always said that there's an angel watching over CDPW. And when Steve Adams retired, we thought, oh no, we'll never find anybody in there.
Most
Came
perfect.
Debbie.
The most perfect one.
And then when Debbie left, that was, we worked very hard.
And we kept having this puzzling series of people get away from us in interviews,
Mhm.
one
Remember that?
after the other.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Oh, remember that, Mark?
It was
Sitting
right
on
here.
another, a
Yeah.
second.
And
yeah,
you walked into Philbrook.
just the right.
Ta-da.
Or they go in. I don't know.
Ultimately.
Thank you all.
Yeah, yep, I will see you next.
And you'll notify us when we should come back.
Yeah, it'll be after Simchat Torah.
I wrote that
It'll be
down.
after the Tishrei holidays.
So we should probably be thinking about what we might.
So,
talk about.
Yeah, think about what you might like to study, and the first session that we have after Simchat Torah, the first session will be figuring out, okay, what do we want to study?
Where do we
this
go
year?
We will
Here.
listen to your high house.
I think we should talk about, no, I'm just joking. I was gonna-
Joke.
No, we study on Tuesday mornings out of the women's commentary.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and so there was somebody may have really been a woman, but they are written in the future as a man.
Well,
Meaning like
That's
Joseph.
so
Joseph.
common. I mean,
Yeah.
look at how many women authors, in Victorian era and in the Regency era wrote as men.
Well, even music, Schumann. Or Schumann. or something.
Curb, one of the Bronte sisters, I think.
But you're reading the women's commentary is, and if you go down to the other things, it's really brings about a lot of thought.
Yeah.
The things that, because we've heard a lot of things so off, I mean, not like we're experts, obviously, but then you get a new, different, little drop to the news and it creates a whole different conversation sometimes. But I know we're not gonna do the women's commentary in here, but it's a good thing, it's a good thing.
It can't hurt.
If we're thematic,
Pardon?
if we are thematic in our approach, sometime we might use that. as
Oh,
well.
yeah, I mean, being, and the Joseph being thrown away and then coming back out and,
Or we choose a
Benjamin.
theme like redemption, or I'm just picking something out. of
Yeah.
there,
but it's taking us a little while and it's really very interesting.
I bought that when it first came out.
Yeah.
I got it.
All
Well,
right.
certain women's bat mitzvah tutoring gift.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
All right, thank you all.
All right. Jim,
Thank
can
you.
help us set up for
Kendra, do
Saturday?
you have a minute? Have you been getting
Can
my
you stay a
emails?
couple-
I'm gonna give her a call this afternoon.
Did
Yeah.
you,
You
I-
help us set up for-
did you,
Saturdays?
I was having
Right
a
now.
hard time.
Well, we don't have to do it Saturday.
My Anthony had changed something
That's
on
fine.
the
I'm trying to.
computer,
so
so
my-
did you see what I wrote, like what I was trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
with her? And then she wrote me back and said it's a
I
really
don't
good
think we'll
idea.
be short
Yeah,
of
and
food.
she-
You know?
I-